Okay, so there's been something of a diplomatic storm, as some of the press has put it, over a legal situation in Indonesia. 6 people, 5 of them foreign nationals, have been executed by firing squad for drug offences. 2 of the countries involved, Brazil and the Netherlands, have recalled their ambassadors. President Rousseff of Brazil has personally been quite outspoken about it. She's even sent condolences to the condemned's family and said that it severely affects Indonesian-Brazilian relations. I want to speak a little bit about this because it's significant on several fronts. Number one, Indonesia hasn't carried out an execution, although it's a country that has the death penalty for a while. There was no executions in the whole of 2014, and these are the first executions of the administration of Joko Widodo. I have to say I'm somewhat surprised because I followed him quite closely ever since he became president, and this was one side to him I didn't realise, that he was very conservative regarding the death penalty. I always got the impression he was quite reformist. So as someone who opposes the death penalty, I'm disappointed. But hear me out before you rush to judgment. Firstly, these 6 individuals were charged with drug offences, so that is the crime that they have been charged with. It doesn't say, I'm looking at a CNN source here, there's other sources. It doesn't give all the details, but it just says citizens of Malawi, Nigeria and Vietnam, as well as an Indonesian woman, were the other people condemned. Just to be clear, I abhor drugs. I think drugs ruin lives. I think drugs cause an enormous amount of pain in this world, and I've always been outspoken against drugs. In terms of dealers, I have very, very little sympathy for what they do. I think it's a despicable thing, especially if it involves getting young people hooked on dangerous substances. It's a despicable trade, and I do think there should be very heavy penalties. Actually, I made another video regarding a British case in Indonesia, a woman called Lindsay Sandiford, I believe her name was. I'm not sure what the current status of that case is. I believe her death sentence was commuted. But this is the thing. This is the fundamental reason why I oppose the death penalty is this. The death penalty, whatever way you try to gloss it over, is state level killing. That's what it is. It's killing. It is the state killing citizens or citizens of another country. That's what it is. Now, most of the comments are in favour of the Indonesian authorities. Even some Brazilians and Dutch are saying, yeah, we're fine with that. It's their laws. That's the consequences. I wanted to make a quick word about this whole idea of their country, their laws. On one hand, that is very true. Every country has a sovereign right to make its own laws, but there is also international laws regarding human rights. Now, the international trend at the moment is against the death penalty. A majority of countries do not use it. Many countries have it in statute, but they haven't used it for years. So the trend isn't against the death penalty. However, there are some situations where then it reverts back. If we look at Pakistan, after the Peshawar bombings, Pakistan's considering going back to the death penalty, and from what I understand, they again, it being a while before since they have carried out executions. Now, at this point, I want to say, just because I have a problem with the death penalty does not mean, and I want to really stress this point, it doesn't mean that I am sympathetic to criminals. Take, for example, terrorists or drug dealers. I think they're scumbags. On a personal point of view, I have no sympathy with them. But I believe the death penalty is a case of 2 wrongs don't make a right. I believe shooting someone in the context of a firing squad is equally brutal to what they do. And actually, in the case of Pakistan, if you hang terrorists, because Pakistan has an Islamist problem, I think it will actually backfire, because all it will do is martyrise these people. I think it's a much better punishment throwing them in jail for years and letting them languish there, rather than martyrising them. In fact, after one of the terrorists were hanged following the Peshawar attacks, thousands of Islamists turned up to treat him like a martyr. In the case of Indonesia, not the same crime, but it's not going to stop the drug trade. And if the Joko Widodo administration thinks it will, they're kidding themselves. China executes hundreds, possibly thousands of people every year. I suspect many of them for drug offences, but doesn't stop organised crime in China. So the death penalty is not a deterrent, that is a myth. I mean, I do believe I'm objective on this. I would say anyone who goes to a country like Indonesia, knowing, no one can claim they don't know it has harsh penalties. Even when you're on a plane, I remember flying into Malaysia, it was a stopover when I was coming back from China. I remember an announcement saying Malaysia has tough penalties against drugs. Nobody can claim that they don't know. So very, very little sympathy for people who knowingly go to countries like that, carrying drugs or planning to get involved in the drug trade. It's about the most stupid thing you can do. But it has to be said, there are flaws. There are serious questions that need to be asked. For example, is a drug mule, i.e. someone who is forced to carry drugs by a dealer, is that the same level as a dealer? Now, in the case of Lindsay Sandiford, she said that gangsters had threatened her family back in Britain. I'd mixed views on that excuse. On one hand, I'm thinking, well, if that's the case, why not just report it to the police? So I didn't really buy her story. However, I don't think that all drug offences are on the same level, and I do think that there's a huge difference between a powerful drug baron and a drug mule. And governments need to recognise that difference. And it seems to me that the Southeast Asian approach, and I say this in a general way because Vietnam and Thailand and other Southeast Asian countries also take tough lines on this, they seem to treat all drug offences as one and the same. They don't seem to differentiate between levels of drug offences. And in this case, I have to say, it sounds like these individuals weren't just drug mules. I think their offences were more serious than that. But it troubles me that so many people who respond to this respond sort of with an emotional response like, oh, they're scumbags, they're drug lords, they deserve what they get, without looking deeper into the case. Now, I'm not saying the Indonesian authorities have got it wrong. I'm not saying that these people aren't guilty. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is, in legal systems in some parts of the world, you have a situation whereby there is definitely a bias in favour of the prosecution. And it's to do with politics, because Joko Widodo wants to send out a strong message, i.e. Indonesia's tough on drug offences. But, you know, Indonesia was tough on drug offences 10 years ago. Did that change anything? No, it didn't. I just, you know, call me what you want, say I'm soft, say I'm a liberal, whatever. I just feel uncomfortable with the death penalty. And I don't think it's fair to say that if someone opposes the death penalty, they're sympathetic to criminals. I believe drug pushers should serve years behind bars. In fact, it could be argued they are punished more that way, because the firing squad is relatively quick, but it's still state-level killing. And I'm aware I'm probably in a minority view on this, because, you know, the majority of people responding were saying things like, oh, drugs destroy lives, they deserve what they get, etc. I'm quite worried about this thing about when in Rome do as the Romans do, regarding law. On one hand, that is true. Every country has a sovereign right to set its own laws. But if you take that argument to extremes, then you could say, well, oh, Saudi Arabia has a right to be lashing Raif Badawi. He's a young man who was sentenced to 1,000 lashes for offending Islam. So if you take that argument, that countries have a right to do what they want with their own laws, to extremes, then basically you're an apologist for some severe human rights abuses. Another example would be Thailand. Thailand jails people for up to 15 years simply for having an opinion on the monarchy. Now, I believe in situations like this, human rights trump sovereignty. I really do. And I know that's a controversial statement. But the point is, it isn't about Western standards, it's about universal standards. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, it is right that there is a debate about this. It is right that there is controversy over these executions. I mean, the Indonesian state can hardly plead innocent when it comes to immorality, when it comes to their actions in Timor. And, Indonesia's been involved in many bloody conflicts. And yes, it's had a lot of achievements as well. It has come through a transition to democracy. That's a good thing. But I'm disappointed that the Indonesian government feels the need to kill human beings to prove it's tough on the drug trade. I believe it's much more effective sending them to jail for years. Why do I believe that's more effective? Because, number one, if you kill them instantaneously, it is what it is, it's killing. Whereas jail is a clear form of punishment. I'll put it this way, if you kill an inmate, or if you kill the condemned person, you are punishing their family as well, when in many cases their family might not be responsible for their decision. Whereas if they're sent to jail, I think the family can be more sort of understanding. They can think, okay, well, my son, my family member made a stupid decision, he or she is paying for it. But to kill them is basically murdering someone. I don't see any difference between the state executing someone and an individual murdering someone. I just don't. Killing is killing. What's the difference? I generally see myself as conservative on crime, but the one exception would be with the death penalty. And I just don't think it should apply to drug cases. Another legitimate argument to be made is drug users have the responsibility of choosing to use drugs themselves. Yes, the dealers are scumbags. Yes, they're responsible for that trade, that industry. But if governments are going to go down the line of, oh, well, drugs are evil and people involved in drugs should be executed, well then, if they're really going to stick to that principle, then every single person who even uses drugs would be executed. Dealers are lowlifes. I've no sympathy for them, but users make the choice to buy the drugs. There are circumstances whereby people are bullied into it by peer pressure, or you have cases of people being spiked, but in other cases, they know what they're doing. So don't they have responsibility? I mean, I agree that the dealers have more responsibility because they're the ones making money from it, from other people's addiction. And again, I cannot emphasize enough that I think what they do is despicable. And yes, they should be punished. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying these people should not face justice. I'm not saying they shouldn't be punished for what they are doing. I just don't believe it will change anything. And all Indonesia is doing is taking 6 human lives. Okay, there might be despicable people, but killing is killing. So, personally, I feel uncomfortable about this. And if you're Indonesian, I would say, well, look at the international trend. Most countries don't have the death penalty anymore. And you can't just say this is a Western thing. Brazil is hardly, Atlanticist country. It's hardly an Anglo-Saxon Western country. It's a developing country. So I think countries that still insist on using the death penalty need to ask themselves the question, do we want to be in the minority here? Because they are. I think at the moment it's something like 2/3 of countries don't use the death penalty, about 1/3 do. And of those that do, only a very small handful account for the majority of executions. China, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, I believe, make up the bulk. Even the United States is having less capital cases than it did, partly because of botched executions. I think what troubles me about this case is that it is not about justice. It's about it's about politics. It's about the Indonesian government trying to send out a tough message. Now, to me, that is about politics interfering with justice. So this is just my opinions. You don't have to agree with me. And just for the record, people might come back and say, oh, well, what about a child murderer? What about a terrorist who's murdered 40 people and so on? I have no doubt there are some people who absolutely deserve the death penalty. What I have a problem with is the death penalty is ultimately based on emotions. Emotional justice. Not restorative justice. Not justice in order to reduce crime, because it doesn't reduce crime. Let's be very clear about that. Killing these 6 people will not stop the drug trade in Indonesia. It won't. I guarantee you there will be more cases in the future. Surely a better punishment would be to jail these people for a long period, maybe 10 years, let's say. Then after that, force them to go on a program whereby they educate other drug dealers or drug users. Surely that would be a lot more pragmatic than just killing 6 people. Why? Because on one hand they are being punished for what they have done, but secondly, it's restorative in the sense that, you know, they're being used for a purpose. You know, why not do something like force them to visit treatment centres where the people who are using their dirty trade are being treated, so they can see the effects firsthand. Now, I'm not saying they don't know about it, but maybe that sort of shock treatment, that sort of you're responsible for this, might be more effective than just killing them. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough here, but I am aware that I'm in the minority with this, but just so there's no misconceptions, in no way that I sympathise with what they are doing, and in no way that I believe that they shouldn't be punished. I just think that the death penalty for drug offences goes too far. I believe the death penalty is extreme. I believe it is state level killing. And, you know, people might say, well, look at the damage drugs cause, it's enormous. That's true, drugs does cause enormous damage, which is why I'm saying they should be punished. But, you know, I don't think that killing people is any better. Because, you know, where do you draw the line? This is the thing about the death penalty. As soon as countries start to use the death penalty, or continue to use it, then in theory they will start expanding capital sentences for other crimes. I mean, to me this is a step back for Indonesian democracy, not a step forward, because what it will do is then will you get to a situation whereby Indonesia ends up in a theocratic situation, like Saudi Arabia. At the moment it's not there, but it might go down that path, and you might then have punishments for offending Islam, and so on. So if you're Indonesian, don't get me wrong, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that people who bring the drug trade to your country shouldn't face the consequences. They should. Of course they should. It's a vile trade and it ruins lives. They should face the consequences. But the death penalty is state level killing.